And for our next conversation, we will be talking about security tokens 2.0. When we think of securities, we think of bonds, stocks, real estate. How do we bring that to the digital age? With that conversation, I'll introduce you to Mauro Castigliani. He is of CM Ventures.
Hello, everyone. Happy to kick it off with Securities 2.0 and my team here on the stage. We make it fast, go in really fast. So we start with a short introduction and already go in the topic. What do you understand under the topic of Securities 2.0? What does it mean to you? Why do we even speak about it 2.0? Eftimia, you can start.
Sure. So first, let me introduce myself. So I'm Eftimia Kefalea. I'm working for Eurex Clearing. That's a clearinghouse, a central counterparty for Eurex Exchange. And I'm responsible there for derivatives clearing development. That includes also topics like what we are discussing today, innovation in the digital space. So what does it mean, securities 2.0? For us, it means, first of all, we have to rethink everything. We have to rethink everything around securities. So how securities are issued, are held, are settling in a system where we can integrate new technology like DLT, but always within a regulatory framework. And what is the challenge there is that we as a CCP, we are always looking at keeping the market safety and integrity and always being in a regulatory, very strict environment. So there we need to somehow integrate the new technology with the existing or developing a regulatory framework, because we need to ensure that innovation like tokenization can always coexist and can be embedded into the existing risk framework, but also the post-trading processes, and that's not so easy. So the key difference here, or let's say the main difference, is that we have a potential for more integrative workflows, and one thing is for sure, that the core principles like market safety, like legal certainty, and also systemic stability, these remain unchanged no matter what type of technology we are engaging with. And at Eurex, we think we are in the forefront of innovation, because we recently launched also a DLT facilitated service for collateral mobilization. So we have clients that use DLT to post collateral to the CCP already every day, and we have a full pipeline. So we are onboarding more and more clearing members.
Amazing. Dotun, go on.
Excellent, thank you. Great to meet you all. So Dotun Romini, I am the former Director of Emerging Technology and Head of Digital Assets Technology at the London Stock Exchange Group, which I suppose is a company that probably needs no introduction. As of August, I since transitioned to join Assetera, a regulated Austrian broker focusing on distribution of digital securities, and I'm sort of leading as CTO and CPO. In terms of Securities 2.0, I believe blockchain technology, being such a transformative technology, has a lot of potential to bring value to the capital market space. There are a lot of challenges, as has been mentioned, with respect to navigating the evolution of regulation to ensure that the value of the technology can be realized in that respect. But I think we're on the cusp of sort of that sort of wave of transition. I think there's a lot of tokenization happening in this space, and I think there's more to come in terms of sort of services that need to be scaled for this to really drive an adoption into the market.
Perfect, thank you very much. Armin?
Thank you very much. My name is Armin Schmid. I'm the CEO of Bitcoin Swiss Europe, here based in Liechtenstein, just about 300 meters away from here. We are in the process to apply for a MiCAR, a CASP license here in Liechtenstein. So we are getting there, not there yet, but definitely the space is open, and I'm very happy to be here on this panel. Thanks a lot for all the good introductions already. I keep it actually quite simple and quite short. For me, Securities 2.0 is simply related to digitally native. So we shouldn't really talk about somehow the interdiscussion between something else from the past. It has to be something totally new. It has to be trustless, definitely. And from my perspective, the code is the law. and everything has to be built around this. Why do we have to somehow link to existing old infrastructure? Let's make it new. Let's make sure that we have the trust delivered. And as I mentioned, the code is the law.
Thank you very much. Already very interesting statements, a little bit different perspectives. And Eftimi, I would like to start with you with the second question. You are from a Eurex central counterparty. Armin mentioned trustless. Decentralized always comes in a lot. How do you see that? What are the main building blocks to enable a good and regulated and proper environment Securities 2.0 style? Will we lose central counterparties? Will all be decentralized? Where will we end that?
Well, I can share some experiences that we saw in the last, let's say, couple of years that we are really active in that space. I can tell you that the market goes where the CCP goes, at least in the institutional space. Why is that? Because CCPs can guarantee really certainty. And what we found out during our participation in the ECB exploratory work for, the wholesale digital currency project that they have. So what we did there, and we proved to the industry and the regulators being in the room, was that at the CCP level, you can seamlessly migrate flows from both traditional, but also, the DLT space. And we could do that by applying the same risk management framework and by giving also regulatory compliance and legal certainty to our clients. So you can imagine that that's, let's say, the key and the door opener for the institutional space to come and join us. So, I mean, in this DLT service that we recently launched, the service existed since years, but it's now the momentum that people just join and want to be part of this ecosystem because there is the security of a CCP in that. So we need regulatory clarity in Europe. Further on, the DLT pilot regime and MiCAR, they don't even mention the word CCPs there. So there needs to be some new regulation that gives regulatory clarity to the institutional space. And we need to come up with solutions that solve existing problems. Because in a bank, getting IT budget just to build a new system, just to have a new one, that's almost impossible. We all know that. So you have to bring value and solve a problem if you want to succeed there. Yeah? And we believe the collateral space is an area where there is a lot of, let's say, potential by using this new type of technologies.
So I'd like to open a little bit the discussion here, that we not just end up with statements. But Dotun or Armin, how do you see that? What's your view on that?
Yeah, no, so certainly I think our purview is very much looking at wholesale markets as well as sort of the more retail and sort of non-wholesale space. I think generally when it comes to wholesale markets, there's a lot of incumbency. Large institutions are the ones dominating these spaces. Very systemically important markets. It has to be slow moving, right? They sort of big tech ethos of move fast and break things really doesn't work within this sort of ecosystem, and therefore there is a need for slow, methodical progress, really taking into consideration risks in every facet, both structural and market. But I think when we move out of that space, I think this is where we're seeing at least the sort of grassroots of a lot more innovation. We are engaging with parties that are tokenizing all sorts of interesting asset classes on the alternative side, from reinsurance products to even cattle. We've had conversations with projects that are looking at this. And certainly I think Mia's comments around sort of the value of collateralization is an interesting one. So certainly within the wholesale space, whereby expanding collateral mobility and collateral efficiency is very, very valuable for a lot of these large institutions. Even outside of the wholesale markets, there is an opportunity and a real need and a sort of demand for scaling the opportunities to provide collateralization for maybe alternative assets. If we look at, for example, some of the work that BlackRock did with the Build Fund, they took a traditional instrument and effectively introduced that to the sort of new crypto and Web3 market. Why is that valuable? This is a space generally where assets that are traded are largely very volatile. It's useful to have safe harbor instruments where you can effectively back out your investments into to be able to hedge and manage your risk. Generally, that's done with the stable coins, of which obviously many are unregulated in various jurisdictions, and there isn't a lot of trust, and there's a lot of risk attached to some of these issues. We saw obviously the failure of Terra Luna a couple of years ago. And so this is where I think assets like money market funds, which not only can provide sort of safety in providing a very stable safe harbor instrument, but actually provide an intrinsic yield, can be very, very interesting for sort of these new markets. And certainly we're seeing demand for other more traditional assets coming into this new space.
Interesting. And Armin, in your direction there with Bitcoin Swiss being more focused on the end client, so therefore we now have two really big institutional views here. How do you see that? Will, at the end, everything change but still be the same, that the big institutionals have the power, or will we end up in this Securities 2.0 direction in, yes, I will buy my securities via Kraken, Bybit or whatever, and retail will win the game and institutionals will lose a lot. How do you see that?
Yeah, look, Bitcoin Swiss is obviously a company which is very much working with institutionals already today. Retail is not really our DNA anymore.
But still the end client more than the big banks.
Yes, but I think a lot has been already shared. So what I definitely want to add is the usability and the user experience. I can give you an analogy. I used to work for eBay, and a couple of years ago, Steve Jobs came up with a nice device called iPhone, and we then really had the challenge to slim down the online experience to a mobile device, which was actually quite much, a lot smaller than the one you have today. And we had about the opportunity to use about 5% of the functionality, and it worked. And this was somehow the building block for also then redefining somehow the online experience. And the same goes exactly into this direction, because I think we just have to make the usability, together with all the ingredients we have talked about, in a much simpler way. So the users from the end customer's perspective, they don't really have to do a PhD to get this used afterwards. And therefore, I'm a big fan actually of simplicity and usability in this case as well, which is not yet the case. Mm-hmm.
An additional question, Dotun, in your direction, because you moved on from the big institutional entity to now something more agile, more modern. How do you see the traditional market participants in this environment? We have exchanges out there like Bybit, Kraken, OKX, and all of them. They made billions with crypto. They have unlimited pockets, and they now applied for MiCA licenses. They apply for MiFID license. They could even build CCPs or whatever. How do you see that? Will the market change, or what will happen there?
Yeah, no, I think some of the trends we're certainly observing is one of, as you mentioned, a lot of the larger, more established and more mature players within the sort of crypto and Web3 space are looking for opportunities to grow their businesses, looking for opportunities to expand into new products. And certainly tokenization and digital security seems to be sort of the big frontier that a lot of these sort of organizations are targeting. There's a lot of activity in the space with respect to, obviously, consolidation around tokenization platforms, products and services. We're seeing, again, a sort of widespread of different types of asset classes that are exploring tokenization and the various value propositions with respect to that. I mean, my position on this has always been, when you look at the value of tokenization, you really need to sort of take a step back and understand who are you actually competing with. We see a lot of players in this space that sort of position themselves vis-a-vis, let's say, other tokenizing platforms, when actually the reality is when you're digitizing traditional assets, you're really competing with the status quo. And my philosophy with that has always been, within the world of the status quo, if you're issuing an asset, providing dealing services, distribution through OTC, brokering, whatever those services are, there is no technology impediment to be able to build that business. Whereas within this new world, we've sort of brought in the contrivances of digital custody and sort of platform onboarding and all of these other considerations that now need to be brought into the fore. So we're sort of in this space now where there is this transition of assets are being digitized, and then sort of most players are sort of hitting this question of, and what now? What's next? How do we make this really valuable and interesting? How do we scale utility consumption for these assets and therefore increase the value vis-a-vis their traditional counterparts? And so for me, it's all about differentiation. How do we make these assets more accessible? How do we scale new markets for existing instruments? How do we provide new business propositions with respect to sort of more traditional asset models? And certainly that's where I think a lot of the exploration is going. But more importantly, there is this promise of, if we tokenize, we'll scale and build liquidity. Well, in my perspective, you need to get assets out there into the hands of investors before you can even talk about secondary liquidity. So distribution is the big frontier that we're sort of seeing. We're having conversations. It's resonating well. And that's really where we're sort of positioning our flag as a key proposition in terms of driving that value and growth of adoption of these technologies into the market.
A very good point, and FTME in that direction, especially directed to you and the company you work for. Is it really a benefit to tokenize existing systems? It works. I can perfectly trade via Eurex, get everything out of it, even in traditional exchanges, even if it's +2. I do not care. I can sell it 10 minutes later. It's just a problem for the banks or not, but it works. Isn't it just risk we bring in here? Why should we tokenize things that are already tradable and have liquidity?
Yeah.
Well, you're right. We have a very well-organized and efficient ecosystem. So we are clearing more than 200 billion in average every day, euros. So why do we need tokenization? But there is indeed inefficiencies in that space as well, because imagine that everyone keeps its assets, may be digital or traditional assets, somewhere else. There are the CSDs, the central security depositories, the ICSDs, there are the global custodians, banks, everywhere. And you cannot have, as a CCP, a connection to everywhere. You have to, you have also regulatory requirements where you can connect to and so on. And your clients are distributed all over the space. So you have a huge fragmentation in terms of custody. And then you have to start, moving assets from one custody place to the other. This is very inefficient. It costs money. You have sometimes also settlement, let's say, failures. You cannot deliver, you get fines, penalties, and so on. So it's a big story and very inefficient. And if you tokenize things and you just bring everyone on the same ledger, under the same framework, then you can just leave the assets where they are. That's what we are also doing in the space of collateral. You just leave the assets where they are. You keep your custody relationship with your bank, your custodian, and so on. And nevertheless, you can post those assets to an exchange, to a CCP, and so on, for delivering your obligations. So we think it's a very efficient way. And that's why we believe there is also space and room for that. And to your point earlier, around new entrants, what we see in the market currently is everyone is building its own silo. So we have these fintechs, the new entrants, they're building their own silo. But they don't talk to each other. So what this new type of technology promises to enable interoperability, everything is compliant and so on, but that's not what we see currently. So that's what we miss. So we believe the journey is going to be more in the direction of convergence. So there will be consolidation, there will be consolidation, and the ones that are going to survive are the ones that will make it to get their foot in the institutional space, because that's where the big business is,
Very interesting, especially the last quotes you brought in, because that would have exactly been the point I would have pointed to Armin. How do you see that? Because every bigger institutional group that is now working on it works on their own chain. SWIFT announced 3 weeks ago at Cybos, we built our SWIFT 2.0 on Ethereum copy. The next one comes, yes, we build our own Ethereum copy that is not connected with each other. Do you see that as a problem, or how do you see that developing, especially with the deep knowledge you have on the blockchain side?
Well, that's indeed one of the big issues we have currently in the space, because you just work in your isolation and you don't really work on interoperability. And I think Securities 2.0 is definitely also something about interoperability between the systems. This is, for me, not there yet, and the question is, what kind of technology is going to be the winning one going forward? So let's see, a couple of years ahead of now, we will see who is going to be the winning ecosystem. But I think it is key that the interoperability works.
If I may jump into that point, actually. So, again, coming back to the distribution point, for us, we see this as sort of a major challenge right now for a lot of players. And certainly one of the big challenges for distribution is exactly this point around you have assets that are deployed to a wide variety of different protocols, many of whom leveraging different token standards, but it's not just about token standards. We think about, these assets ultimately, they're not bearer instruments, they are securities. So we also need to think about life cycle events, such as coupon and dividend payment, such as redemptions. And so there's a whole host of problems where you're seeing lots and lots of variations in different aspects of the market around how these things are coming together. We have cash legs in terms of stable coins and a variety of different chains, lots of engagements and sort of activities in the CBDC space with no real alignment or conversations happening around how do we bring these into sort of common infrastructure fabric. So I think these are questions that certainly need to be answered. My philosophy on this is really one of what we need are sort of coordination standards to really bring a lot of these ecosystems and technologies together. There are solutions out there that can try to provide sort of base level and fairly granular interoperability between different technologies, but I think it's at the activity level that focus needs to come together. And I see the analogy of that very, very similar to what we've seen in the sort of evolution of the traditional space with respect to sort of trade execution, life lifecycle management, FIX sort of emerged as a coordination standard around how can we have a common way of interacting between brokers and member firms and exchanges. And certainly we see sort of similar in the sort of pre-trade and post-trade space with ISO 222. And I think DLT needs something very similar that basically sort of casts across the entire web, that runs cross-chain, cross-asset, and is very much activity and asset-focused as opposed to technology-focused.
Very, very good points. And also in that direction also, the question is like, it will build, it will take time, but therefore, what will be there first? Will there be asset classes that are not available on Eurex and other central counterparties today, or how do you see that? Will it be existing things, or will it be things that need liquidity, do not have it now? What do you see there as really working first and in a scale?
Yeah. So certainly, during my time at the LSEG, we spent a lot of time looking at opportunities in, let's say, again, the sort of wholesale space where sort of LSEG's bread and butter and where we play. And I think what was very clear is whilst there are opportunities on the post-trade side around solving for various sort of structural inefficiencies with the technology, it is very much around the edges because there's a lot of incumbent technology that is, as we've already discussed, fairly efficient. Where we saw the most opportunity was certainly on the private market side.
Okay. Oh,
it's a space that's very fragmented. There's moderate to no liquidity for many of these assets. And the market itself is sort of inherently fragmented. There's no sort of structural normalization around how assets are formed and issued. And so it creates a really interesting opportunity for one to come in and sort of scale services to bring ultimately a technology that's very good at establishing assets discreetly where they can have their own sort of structural uniqueness, but at the same time interact commonally through things like token standards. So certainly that's where we've seen a lot of growth and development.
Oh, amazing.
And from our perspective, I mean, this new type of technology, distributed ledger technology, still needs to prove itself, right? So it's not a one-tool-fits-all technology. We all know it's a slow database, so I would never engage with this type of technology, for example, if I'm a high-frequency trader. Yeah, it doesn't fit. Yeah, so you cannot just say, oh, that's the solution to all our problems. There are very good use cases where we are already applying and we are continuing to apply those things. So, I mean, I don't know, I don't need, let's say, DLT for instant settlement, I have it today. So there are very good use cases, but I just don't want to overpromise here that, in 5 or 10 years, everything is going to run on DLT and there is no traditional infrastructure anymore. I believe that's more of a transition, so it's a journey that collectively us as a financial industry are already into. So it's a transition phase, and I believe that we will live for a long period of time in a hybrid world where both ecosystems are going to work together. And the more the time passes, the more the two ecosystems come together until we find an equilibrium. Yeah.
And to now end the panel, because we're running out of time, I would like to have from every one of you a last quote. Where do you see Securities 2.0 in 10 years? Armin, you can start.
Look, in the end, we have talked about interoperability. Let's build an existing law. Let's build an existing infrastructure. I think it can't really just done new. I think that's one, too. It has to be, and I think that's for me the most important one, digital native. Stop talking about digital twin. Why do we need a digital twin? We need digital native things from end to end. Be it the EID that KYC is somehow there, the auditability is there. You also have somehow compliance built in as well. So an end-to-end experience from a digital native perspective is, for me, the most important element, building on existing building blocks.
Thank you. Dr.
Absolutely agree with Owen's point. I think we've certainly seen in the market a lot of evolution of tokenizing assets through derivative structures. And so I think sort of getting to that place of being able to natively digitize securities on-chain is going to be vital. In some cases, that will require regulatory and policy change and amendments to facilitate that evolution, but I think it's coming. And I think beyond that, just being able to scale services in a fairly ubiquitous way to solve for digitizing and managing those assets on-chain, providing access ubiquitously, and scaling services and driving innovation. I think that's really going to be a sort of focal point of evolution.
Perfect. Thank you, Eftimia. The last word to you.
I fully agree with everyone here. So why do we need digital twins? Yeah, I fully agree. But in order to go to let's say, pure native, digital native space, we need also others to to come with us, it's first of all regulators. Yeah, we need to educate the regulators. That's not something that one institution can do standalone. That's a collective industry duty to educate regulators and get them where they need to be, first of all. And then secondly, we need also tools like, central banks accepting those types of assets. We're not there yet. So this is all the things that I need as an institutional player here and an FMI in a traditional financial ecosystem, yeah, to be able to offer what I offer today also in the future.
Perfect.
So, but I'm optimistic we'll get there.
That's definitely a great last statement. Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience. We close the panel, and I hand over to Christine. Thank you.